If somebody came to me and asked, should I send my kid to ex-gay therapy? Should I go to ex-gay therapy? My first reaction would be run. Run away. There's nothing they can do for you other than cause pain. I was brought up in the Southern Baptist Church, and it was a fairly conservative denomination. And our church in particular was very much so a cult of personality around our pastor. And that made it very difficult for me growing up and being gay. It was railed against multiple times in our church. Being gay was viewed as a sin and the worst thing that could possibly happen to a person. And it was just terrible. And all these messages that I got growing up about being gay were that it's wrong, it's a sin, it will lead to destruction and death. And that's the message I heard growing up as a kid. This is what I am. This is not some abstract thing they're talking about me. And it was a conflict for me. I didn't view myself as a bad person. I didn't view myself as someone who was, all these things that they're saying from the pulpit. And yet, I'm gay. And so I had to wrestle with that and to process that growing up as a kid. How scary
was that?
It was terrifying. I mean, growing up in Clovis, New Mexico, small town, we were the largest town for 100 miles in any direction. And growing up there, I felt very alone. I mean, there were a few people that I knew who were gay. One of which was actually our next door neighbor had a son who owned the furniture store in town. And he and his partner managed the furniture store. And I will say that I never really heard my parents say anything negative about them. I do remember asking, why they were so close and why they were together all the time. And at one point, my parents finally told me, they said, well, they're together as a couple. And, I don't remember exactly how my mother put it, but she said something to the effect of, well, we don't believe that way, but, they're still nice people. There was a lot of people that would ask questions, oh, well, why don't you date? Oh, I'm just too busy. Well, aren't you interested in this person or that person? Oh, yeah, she's lovely, but, I'm just too busy. I don't have time for that. And so that's kind of what I did for many years. It was in my 20s before I ever really started to come to terms with the fact that I'm not attracted to women. I'm not bi, I'm not straight, certainly, and I'm attracted to men. So my initial introduction into the ex-gay therapy was through my church and through this guy who had kind of pointed me in the right direction there. And I started going to see my therapist, and I will say right at first, it didn't seem terrible. I was going through a lot emotionally, dealing with a lot of things that I'd repressed for years. And at first, it was an opportunity to be able to talk openly about stuff. Things that I had never thought that I could tell another human being, I could now all of a sudden talk about openly. And in some ways, that was at least helpful to me. As we moved forward, then it took a little more sinister tone and started being more about, we need to change who you are, as opposed to, hey, let's talk about these things that you've never told anybody else before. When it became a case of me having to go through exercises to decrease my attraction to men and go through all these readings and these workbooks and things like that we were going through, it started bringing up a weird conflict in me. I started getting to the point where it seemed more and more ridiculous. it seemed more and more like this just doesn't ring true. This doesn't seem right. And so I started asking more questions. And the more questions I asked, the less impressed I was with the therapy. One of the first ones that they introduced to me was rubber band therapy. It's just like when somebody wants to quit smoking and they put a rubber band around their wrist, and every time they think about having a cigarette, they pop the rubber band, and they're supposed to associate pain and displeasure with these thoughts about, nicotine or cigarettes. Well, for me, it was about men. And so every time I thought anything about a man, or anything that I was attracted to a man, or romantically attracted to a man, I was supposed to pop the rubber band and experience, discomfort and associate those two. That didn't work. He would have me thinking about, being with a man, or thinking about some guy that I was attracted to, and, kind of guided tour, walk me down this path, in my mind about, what I was thinking about this guy or whatever. And eventually he would pop an ammonia capsule under my nose, adding pain and shock, and I didn't expect it, especially that first time. I mean, it was like, what kind of psychopath, pops an ammonia capsule under someone's nose without their knowing what's going on? And it burned, and there were tears, and it, at that point, it really started to seem very ridiculous what I was putting myself through. It didn't seem to be working. I was just as attracted to men as I ever had been. The thing, especially about that ammonia capsule one, is I felt like it was a betrayal. I was trusting him. I was doing as he was asking. I was, giving over my kind of like control of my thought process to him. And we're having this guided therapy session, and then all of a sudden it's almost like as if he punched me in the nose. And I was mad, honestly. That really kind of upset me. And that was one of the major things that really started to get me to question both his methods and his motivations. That it led to nothing but death and destruction. He would occasionally make comments about, that, you'll get AIDS, all the people that I know who have chosen this lifestyle, have either gotten AIDS or been ostracized by their family, or they've lost work over it, all these different things that are negative effects of coming out back in the 80s and 90s, that quite frankly have nothing to do with actually being gay. It has to do with homophobes. I started to question things the further we got into it. It just seemed like there were people that I knew that were gay that didn't seem to really have a problem being gay. Now, at that point in time, I wasn't really close friends with anyone who was gay, or at least not that I knew of. Amazing how that works, right? When we're all in the closet, then none of us know that there's support outside of the church and outside of, this sort of therapy. But, as I moved forward, and I started realizing that this therapy is not what it's cracked up to be. It's not actually doing anything helpful for me, and it's quite frankly harming me. That's whenever I started seeing things differently, and I guess it was kind of like having the blinders taken off my eyes. All of a sudden, I was seeing people that I knew that were gay that were like, oh, well, they seem happy, they seem okay. Yeah, they probably are, upset about breaking up with a boyfriend, just like, my best friend is upset about breaking up with a girlfriend, But it's not any different. And the only difference is when the religious right and these ex-gay therapists and conservatives who don't believe that being gay is something innate and they believe it's something that's a choice, whenever they have their say, that's when it becomes a difficult road. It was money out of my pocket and money that was not well spent, you know. I finally got to the point where I was like, this is not healthy. This is not healthy for me. I had been very active in my church. I had been very active in my singles group. I had been, you know, one of the ones that was there every time the doors were open at the church. And as such, I also had a key to get into our singles room and such like that. And I remember whenever I finally got to the point where I was like, I'm done with this. This is not who I am. This is not who I need to be. And I need to, for my own safety, get away from it. And I remember inviting the singles minister over to come get the key. I was done. I was walking away, and the last bit of business was handing over that key. And I remember meeting him at my apartment gates. I wouldn't let him in the gate, and I reached through the gate and I handed him the key, and I turned and walked away. And he said, "You're going to regret this decision. And you're walking away not just from me, but you're walking away from God and the church and all that you've worked so hard for." And I just kept walking.
And do you regret that decision?
Not one bit. I wish I'd done it sooner. Even though it's been years since I've gone to ex-gay therapy, I still struggle with it. I still struggle with the decision that I made to go there to begin with. I feel like it's made me less available to the men that I date. It makes me less sure of myself. At the time, whenever I should have been out dating and figuring out who I was and figuring out what kind of guy I like and what kind of guy I want to be with, I was wasting my time with ex-gay therapy. I was wasting my time with exorcisms. I was wasting my time with not accepting myself. I'm friends with a guy that's about my age, and when his son came out, he actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, I know you've been where my kid is. What advice would you give me?" And I told him, I said, don't buy into the dogma that being gay is a sin. Don't buy into the dogma that being gay is anything other than a natural variant. Love your kid and treat him with respect. I should have been going to therapy encouraging me to accept who I am and explore who I am and learning to like myself, you know, instead of learning to hate myself. To any legislature out there that's considering banning ex-gay therapy for minors, do it. Do it yesterday. There's nothing that proves any sort of efficacy of this therapy. There's no statistics to back up that it works, and all it does is torture the kid. Instead, let's encourage parents to accept their gay kids. Let's encourage parents to open a dialogue with their kids and to just love them for who they are. But absolutely, it's a dangerous practice for minors. I'm happy being who I am. I love the fact that I don't have to hide who I am. Whenever I was hiding who I was, I couldn't be honest. And that bothered me, and that caused me a lot of trouble and a lot of pain. No, I don't regret walking away. Not one bit.